don't have insight, I don't have wisdom, but let me know what your insight and wisdom is. Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and you're watching another video here on the channel. Welcome. A few weeks ago, not sure how many weeks ago it was, I posted a video about duologies. I am following on with that series, and today we're talking about trilogies. There are so many trilogies out there in the world that I will have forgotten to put in this video, and for that I apologise. I've already thought of like 10 more duologies that I didn't put in the duologies video. It is what it is. But I'm going to share some of my favourite trilogies, some trilogies that I think are excellent or worth picking up or interesting to talk about. Something about there. And along the way, we'll probably discuss some bits about trilogies in general and my feelings on them. And hopefully at the end you'll have some new books you want to read. That's my goal, that's my aim. I will say, right at the off, I have another video planned. In fact, I have 2 more videos planned, though one of them will be coming much later in the year. One is a series longer than 3 books. So things where there are multiple trilogies stacked on top of one another, Realm of the Elderlings specifically. That'll be coming in that video, and I'm also going to do standalones. So if you're excited for both of those, let me know. And without further ado, let's go. So, there's the YA trilogy. Is a classic of its time. We see it still. Well, I think we see it less frequently in the same way. You know, the heyday of YA trilogies we had there. The big 3. Were there 3? There were probably more than 3, but the 3 that I really remember were Hunger Games, Maze Runner, and maybe Divergent is probably the one I would go with. Probably. Though sound off in the comments below if you think there are other YA trilogies that were that big. Maybe Chaos Walking, is that a trilogy? But those were the big 3 for me, and I didn't read Maze Runner until I was in university because the idea of a place that was only boys did not interest me. How did I not know? How did I not figure out? How did I not know? Anyway. But I have read all 3 of the ones that I have mentioned, and I loved Divergent, unashamedly. Kind of ashamedly now. Looking back, I can realise it wasn't that great. I still think Hunger Games is worth reading. I've reread it several times. I still think it's a really good time. So that's my one that I would say yes. Although it does commit some of the cardinal sins, or maybe just that was the start of the tropes of trilogies where it will be Book 1, we are in a location. Book 2, we leave the location. Book 3, we go back to that location, which I've talked about in various other videos, especially when I was talking about The Prison Healer, which is a currently releasing YA trilogy. That's my comment on kind of old school YA trilogies. I think Hunger Games is a really good time. There are better trilogies out there, and I read a lot more adult fantasy now. There's still a fair amount of YA on this list. I'm just looking at the pile next to me, but there's some adult stuff in there as well. I'm excited. I just want to talk about them. I just want to dive in. I do own all 3 books in most of these trilogy stacks, but I've only brought up the first book because I'm running out of room on my upstairs shelves. I need to just take a whole pile of books downstairs, and it's a long way up and down, and I have tiny baby bird arms, and I can't do it. So, Greenbone Saga. I've done a review vlog of this at this point in time. I don't know when this video is going up, but it was fairly recently. I love this trilogy, and I think this trilogy especially speaks to me because it is so interesting in terms of the narrative. So Ken Liu describes this as an epic drama reminiscent of the best classic Hong Kong gangster films, but taking place in a fantasy metropolis so gritty and well imagined that you'll forget you're reading a book. And that is a better description of this story than I could ever possibly manage to do in a succinct way in a video featuring multiple books. So excuse me for using your words, Ken. However, what I really love is that the narrative across these 3 books is not chunk of things happen, chunk of things happen, chunk of things happen, except that it is, except that it isn't, except that it is, because it doesn't feel like 3 distinct books, it feels like one narrative that has 3 stopping points. And I reckon you could write a whole other book in this, and it would just be fantastic. But it ends where it should, don't get me wrong. But in terms of what this story is doing, it isn't beginning, middle, end, beginning, middle, end, beginning, middle, end. It's sort of just like events, events, events. And I love that, and I think that's why book 2 really works. And one of the things that I think is going to come up a fair amount in this video is the idea of a second book as a part of a whole. So I think first books tend to stand reasonably well on their own, and then will typically end in a cliffhanger, and you'll be like, oh, I'm here forever. I have to wait for the next book, because that sells the next book. Second books, not always, but quite typically tend to feel a bit kind of like, oh, what's happening here? This is a little bit flat. And then once you've read the third book, book 2 goes up. I know Angela's talked about this before. She's probably going to come up a lot in this video. But Jade War, which is the second book in this series, does that. It's a very good book on its own, in my opinion. But as part of our trilogy, it's just right. The structure of this trilogy is fantastic. Would highly recommend. Aha, you can go back up here with your friends. Now those are out of order. I don't know if it'll be in frame. I don't want to hear about it. This, in theory, could go in my multiple trilogies that fit together video that will come in the future. But I wanted to talk about Joe Abercrombie's trilogies, and I think they do count as two separate trilogies, but apparently I just didn't bring the First Law upstairs. So, the First Law trilogy, I have a review video up for it. It was my first overbooked video, I think. One of the very early ones, so it's quite old now, but I think it's a really solid trilogy. It's good. It's not my favourite. This trilogy, the Age of Madness trilogy, just broke my heart into a million tiny pieces and is so well written and so good. And I think it's really a sign of the progression of Joe Abercrombie's writing and like the progression of like where publishing is. Oh, I could talk about it for hours. But do you need to read the previous trilogy before you pick this up if they're in separate things? I think you do because I think it's better, but it is a worse trilogy, so it's hard to explain to people. But anyway, this trilogy, amazing. 3 books, both split into 3 sections, so you kind of do get that beginning, middle, end, beginning, middle, end, beginning, middle, end, converse to Jade City. It's fascinating, and this, I think, really exemplifies that catharsis of a trilogy, and what I love, which is where the characters are at the start of book 1 should be drastically different from where they are at the end of book 3, but it should still make complete sense how they got there, and this trilogy does that perfectly for me. I want to reread it again right now. Oh, it's so good. Grimdark, fantasy, but the Industrial Revolution, and just horrible people doing horrible things, and yet you care about them. Oh, so good. YA trilogies, another one that I've talked about fairly recently, Girls of Paper and Fire, Girls of Storm and Shadow, Girls of Fate and Fury. This is a sapphic YA trilogy that is a lot about trauma and healing and also revolution, and it's so good. I really recommend these if you like a YA trilogy, YA fantasy trilogy specifically, because I think YA dystopian trilogy is a whole other kettle of fish. Now this does do we were in a location, we went away from the location, we went back to the location, but it does it really well and it does it in a way that makes sense. And I don't know why it didn't bother me. I really, really love this trilogy. I don't have much to say on it in terms of where it stands in my opinions on trilogies in general, because I think in that sense it doesn't do anything particularly special. I just wanted to highlight it because it's great. Another utterly fantastic trilogy where we have another book, a collection of stories coming out this year. Oh, so excited. Daevabad. I think it's Daevabad. This is a fantastic trilogy from S.A. Chakraborty. This features djinn magic and fish out of water stuff, and I don't want to explain it too much because it's just so good. Politics, romance, all of the above. This is great. This is another series where just the catharsis of book 3 is so incredible. If you are going to read these, I personally recommend the audiobooks. I think they are fantastic. Obviously read them physically as well. I own them all physically. I don't have a huge amount to say in terms of thoughts on trilogies. This is just a trilogy that I really think people should read. I think if I was going to say anything, it would be about, again, catharsis of third books. If you took one trilogy away from the series to read, I think it would be Daevabad if you haven't already read it. I think. A trilogy I talk about all the time, the Tide Child trilogy by R.J. Barker. This is pirates, they're not really pirates, but think of it as pirates, naval, fantasy, dragons, sea dragons, revolution, everything I want. And this does the start of book 1 characters to end of book 3 characters so well. The ending of book 3, a little bit weird, but good. And I'm going to come on to one later where sticking the landing for book 3 is going to be significant. I need to do a full reread of this trilogy already. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's phenomenal. From start to finish, this is another trilogy that I really think you should read. I think the journey of Jorah, our main character, in this trilogy is just phenomenal, and it's just fascinating. Just read it. Just promise me you'll read it. Promise me. I don't have the first book with me. I only have the third one, but this is the Poppy War trilogy. I believe it's called the Poppy War trilogy. I'm not 100% sure that that's what the trilogy is called, but the first book is the Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. Now. A lot of people didn't like this ending. So the question is it worth reading a trilogy if you know that the ending is not that good? My opinion, yes, because I really like book 1 and 2. In this specific circumstance, this is the trouble, because quite a lot of times I will use the third book of a trilogy in order to determine whether or not I will actually keep them on my shelves. And that is part of what I'm going to do. I'm going to read the Poppy War again, starting this week actually, and I'm going to decide if I want to keep the series. I think I will. They were so a big part of my life. And I did like the third book. I wasn't one of the people who really disliked it. But if you hadn't encountered them and you were thinking, do I need to read the Poppy War? I've heard the third book isn't good. Does that put you off reading it? I don't think it does for me, because I like to read things and find out for myself. Let me know your thoughts. I'm interested. I don't have insight, I don't have wisdom, but let me know what your insight and wisdom is. Similarly, Archivist Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This is a YA, somewhat dystopian, futuristic series where people don't die anymore, but we still have to kill some people, and Scythes are the people responsible for killing people. AI, interesting stuff. Book 3, I personally feel not that great. Book 1, not that great. Book 2, excellent. Basically, I don't like the romance in this series. It bothers me. I'm not interested in it, and it features quite a lot. But I've hung on to this, and I'm going to reread it at some point, when I get to it for Overbooked, I suspect, and I'm going to decide at that point, because I think that maybe for me, trilogies where the world is interesting is possibly the most important thing. But then I love characters. I don't know. See, these videos make me have an existential crisis. What am I? Who am I? What do I even like to read? I do think the world in this series is absolutely fantastic, and the questions it poses are fascinating. It would make a really interesting... I don't think this one would make a really interesting book club book, but I think the questions that this book poses would make an interesting book club, you know? Can you read a trilogy as a book club? Is that a thing you're allowed to do? Would that just be a total mess? Like, we can't even schedule ourselves for one book. How would we cope with 3? Best not to question. Some more YA and alternate history. And I Darken by Kirsten White. I talked about this quite a lot in the past. I've not read it for a long time, and I'm wary of recommending things that I haven't read for a very long time in case I don't like them anymore, and then that would be confusing. This is Jennifer Vlad the Impaler alternate history, and I think it's really good. I've really enjoyed them. They are one of my nostalgic YA trilogies. It was kind of one of the first YA trilogies I read having got back into reading. I stopped reading at kind of the height of YA dystopian, and I was like, what's new? What's happening now? And this is what was happening at that point, and I really enjoyed it. It was fresh, it was good, similarly very cathartic 3-book process, and a good cast of characters. I didn't bring them up, so sorry editing Judith, you'll have to put the covers in, but the Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab is one that has mixed reviews. I have friends who really don't like it, or haven't got on with it, is probably the words they would use. I personally really enjoy them. I think they are my favourite example of like a fun trilogy that you just get through it, and it's a nice time, and there's some emotional moments, and there's some fun moments, and there's some romance, and I just have a wonderful time with it, and I don't have that much more to add. I just wanted to flag up that this series exists and that I enjoy it. But I think everyone on Bookish Internet has already heard of these, so we'll move swiftly along. Another YA trilogy. This I've not recommended a lot over the pandemic because it does feature a deadly virus that makes you cough, and that felt a little bit insensitive. However, I do think this is a really strong YA trilogy. It's very tropey, but it's a good time. It involves hacking. It involves hacking your genes. Again, similarly to Scythe, the interesting implications of some of the world building that get explored across these 3 books I find fascinating, and I think that's something a trilogy allows you to do, is you can set up, this is all the cool stuff you can do with this in book 1, and then you can go, and here's the reasons this might not be great in book 2, and then you can resolve it all in book 3, and there's just the time to get into that you don't necessarily get in a standalone or a duology, particularly in YA because they tend to be shorter. This is not enough pages to do all that this book needs to do, so we get 3 of them. I'm in the same outfit as I was when I filmed it. I've just filmed a review for the Inheritance trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, so I won't get into that too much. This is a phenomenal trilogy that feels very different from any other trilogy I've read. Would recommend, will link my review. I don't own them, which is a travesty, and I will buy them at some point in a book haul. It will happen. The Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin is absolutely fantastic. Again, for narrative structure interestingness, for getting to really dig into the ins and outs of a world, the ins and outs of a character, the ethics and morals of everything that's happening. All of Broken Earth is it's just fantastic. It's a reason it won so many awards. It's great. Dominion of the Fallen is another one that I have reviews up for. This is just another trilogy I picked off my shelf, like, oh yeah, that's 3 books, great. Interesting world building, magic, 3 very distinctly different books, and this is a really great example of my personal reading of trilogies. Even though I read these back to back, I still found that it took me until book 3 to be like, oh yeah, that's what happens here. This is what's significant. I understand. And sometimes that is what happens with a trilogy, and I think for some people that's a sign of a bad trilogy or a bad bit of writing that you don't get it until 3 books later. I think that can be the case, especially if you're reading a new trilogy and you have to wait a year for each new book, or more in some instances. But because I read these when all 3 of them were out, it was okay, I think. Complicated feelings? Complicated questions? I don't recommend that to everyone because I think they are a little bit complicated and weird, but they are so good. Are there any others? See, there's a lot of trilogies that are unfinished at the moment that would probably be on this list in about a year. And there's a lot of things that are more than 3 books that I cannot talk about. So maybe we will revisit this topic in a year or so and talk about finished trilogies that I would now add to this list. These aren't all things I would recommend to everyone. These are all trilogies that I have personally enjoyed, and also some of these I haven't read for a very long time. I haven't read This Mortal Coil in about 2 years. because that's not how reading works. I don't have time to reread everything I read before I mention it in a video, but I do remember having really good feelings about it. So if you've read any of these and you feel differently, absolutely your prerogative, and feel free to sound off in the comments below if you're like, no, I hate that. If you don't like this, you won't like this. Try and be constructive though. What other trilogies have you read and enjoyed? Plonk them down in the comments below. Oh my goodness, Daughter of Smoke and Bone. See, this is the thing. I will continue to keep thinking of new trilogies I should bring up. Daughter of Smoke and Bone is a great trilogy. It's great. Laini Taylor writes great books. I mentioned her in duologies as well. YA tropey goodness. Oh, it's great. I think for me, my big thing is that trilogies, particularly YA trilogies, are very nostalgic to me. It tends to be if I've made it to the end of a trilogy and I've decided I want to keep it. I have been unhauling a lot of YA trilogies lately, so I know that's not true all the time. If I've kept it, I will hold a place for it, and I will remember it, even if later on I'm like, I don't really love this anymore. I will remember the time that I loved it, and I think that's because trilogies take so much energy and effort to get through, particularly if you're reading them back to back. They are a part of your life. I can remember what I was doing when I read that most recently, and when I read that trilogy back to back, I was in this place in life, and I really found that this bit was particularly interesting. And I think that's going to be even more true for extended series, which is the next video in this series. I'm not sure when that's going up. Plonk your recommendations for trilogies down in the comments below. If you haven't already, while you're commenting, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. Follow me on social media. Come hang out on Discord, where we have a wonderful time talking about books. Thank you to my Patreon supporters who make me feel extra loved and appreciated and support this channel. That link's all down in the description as well. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. It's gonna be some bloopers now. This came from downstairs, so it'll have to go on a stack. But I will definitely remember to take downstairs at the end of this video. Not.